Today we're fortunate enough to have the Kugler team with us here to speak about foliar feeding. I'd like to welcome Jay Fielding, who is a chemical engineer that spent 26 years with Dow AgroScience before he retired, and then came out of retirement to join the Kugler team 10 years ago. Also joining us from Kugler today, we have Lee Hoyt, who's been with Kugler for over 30 years and is the head of their plot trials and data gathering there. We're so glad that you guys could join us today.
Thank you for that introduction. I've recognized a number of names. A lot of you folks have been with Kugler and with TopKrop for a number of years, but for those of you who haven't, we're a company that's been in business since 1924. We don't make anything but liquid fertilizers. We have 7 manufacturing sites across the Midwest. The site that I'm associated with, Rapid City, South Dakota, is the one that services the 3 prairie provinces in Canada. And so welcome. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about our product. Some of you have heard some of this before, but you know, you can't change it midstream. Our message is the same as it was when we first went into Canada back in 2012. So we're pleased to be here, and we'll get started. Let's see. Okay, precision placement foliar. Foliar is a precision placement. For those of you who are perhaps a little fuzzy on what the definition of foliar is, it's not just spraying a fertilizer over the top of a field. If you top dress wheat with 28%, you're getting very little foliar or through the leaf development there. And what ends up happening is you've got to have something that, number one, is able to go into that leaf through the polar cuticular pathway. And you also have to have something that's going to keep it on that leaf rather than it just running off. Say, for instance, one of our starter fertilizers that doesn't work in those situations. Well, this very important slide here, because there's some misconceptions out there in the industry as a whole. Foliar applications can't by themselves meet the total nutrient demand of a plant. There will always be a need for soil applied fertilizers. If you are not increasing the concentration of chlorophyll on your leaf, you might as well not be foliar feeding, because that is probably the most important aspect of a good foliar product, is increasing the concentration of chlorophyll on the leaf. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. So why foliar feed? Well, there are inherent nutrient uptake inefficiencies in agriculture in general, but soil applied, a physical limitation would be soils that were very, very compacted. A chemical limitation would be pH. There are certain pHs, high and low, that release other nutrients. For instance, at low pH, aluminum is released. Well, that aluminum ties up almost instantly with something else. Phosphorus is one of the typical products that it ties up with in the soil. And then at low pHs, that aluminum phosphate is insoluble. The same thing happens with iron and calcium at high pHs. And let's say, for instance, we take calcium. Well, calcium phosphate is insoluble, and all nutrients must be dissolved in water or they're not available to that plant root. It's not something that's new. It's been documented for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And everybody's got a sprayer or availability of a sprayer or aircraft or something similar. We put our foliar products through pivots on a regular basis. And of course, advanced crop genetics have lent themselves to higher yields utilizing foliar feeding. Back in the early 1970s, when the Bt gene was introduced, for instance, into the canola crop, there was almost an instantaneous increase in yield. Yes, some of it was because weeds were being killed, but there's also that portion of it that the genetics alone allowed for higher yields as well. Now, foliar nutrients are mobilized directly into the plant leaves. You've probably read at some point or another the incorrect statement that foliar fertilization occurs through the stomata. That is not the case. Some will go through, but actually it's very little in the total concentration that gets into that leaf. It goes through something called a polar cuticular pathway. It's a very, very small opening in that cuticle on that plant leaf that has to be at least a nanometer or less in size. It's got to be extremely small. And that's the limitation, is the size of that molecule. And it also has to have some other attributes, which we'll get into in a minute. But you increase the rate of photosynthesis in the leaves by increasing that concentration of chlorophyll on the leaf. Imagine chlorophyll as being a greenhouse effect. Once that photon from the sun hits that leaf, if you can trap it for a billionth of a second longer, keeping in mind that there's a trillion photons hitting that same leaf at the same second, you have dramatically increased the rate of photosynthesis and hence the uptake of water from the soil, where all your nutrients are dissolved in order to be effective. Again, we're going to hit this issue many times, because again, if you're not increasing the concentration of chlorophyll on the leaf, I think in our opinion, you're wasting your time, your effort, and your money. All you're doing is getting the product on the ground. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but you're not foliar feeding, which is an incredibly efficient way to deliver nutrients. So it increases the chlorophyll production and hence the rate of photosynthesis on the leaf, which in turn increases the uptake of water via the vascular system. Remember that the total gross chemical reaction associated with photosynthesis is water plus carbon dioxide yields oxygen and sugar. You've got to have that water in the uptake portion of it, which again increases, that rate increases with the rate of photosynthesis. So this is just kind of a tool to use. This gives it all in a single circle. Number one, you increase the chlorophyll concentration on the leaf. Number two, you increase your photosynthesis rate. Number three, you increase the water and soil nutrient uptake. And number four, you get a biomass increase. Biomass meaning more leaves. Your leaves are the engine of your plant. That's what gets everything going from those first two leaves that emerge at emergence throughout the growth of that plant. And the more that you foliar feed, the better off you're going to be for the entire season, and the healthier that plant's going to get, given Mother Nature's cooperation.
This is the most important slide, other than there's one other one, of the four main things that you need to foliar feed. But this here is the most important slide in the whole presentation. So you need to understand that foliar feeding is all about increasing chlorophyll, increasing photosynthesis, and taking up soil nutrients and increasing the biomass. Like Jay said, the bigger the corn leaf, the bigger the canola leaf, the bigger the barley leaf, the more sunlight that hits that leaf more nutrients that you're going to take up from the soil, because it's got to have those to grow and to develop. And the more you can bring from the soil, the more yield you're going to get.
And go back to the slide that says that foliar feeding can't do it by itself. And if somebody tells you that their product can meet your crop's nutrient demands for the season, you need to just turn around and walk away, because it's not true agronomically and it's not true biologically in that plant.
We've got to all remember that there's only 3 pounds of nitrogen in a gallon of XRN. So we all know that 3 pounds of nitrogen spraying on the leaf is that some companies say it will. It all has to do with photosynthesis. And until you believe and until you understand how that works, you're not going to believe in foliar feeding.
Now, here's just an example. This was done in North Dakota. This is a pea crop. You can see where he sprayed. 1 gallon of our KS 2075, 20% of that blend is the KQXRN, our slow release nitrogen. 6 bushel increase on peas. Not only did he pay for the application, but he made some money on top of that. And that's what you're looking for. And you can see it all the way around in the back, where he did a single pass all the way. And this is what we see normally. You should have a very fast green up, because that chlorophyll concentration is increasing 3 to 4 days. Now, keep in mind that you also get sufficient nitrogen, which is the primary active ingredient in the chlorophyll molecule, from the soil. No question about it. But it's delivered much faster when it goes on the leaf in the foliar way. Now, here is proof. This is the 2-dimensional chemical structure of chlorophyll. Got a magnesium center ion, and you've got the 4 nitrogens around it, and then a series of aliphatic and aromatic hydrocarbons. That nitrogen that comes from the KQXRN is infused into that leaf in a form that the plant can then take and turn into chlorophyll. And that's the key behind foliar feeding. If it runs off the leaf, you're not getting any benefit of it. And if it's the wrong kind of product, then you're also not getting the benefit in it. We'll get into that in a second here. Now, here's our products. Our slow release products are primarily based on urea. Urea, based on this slide, which represents work that was done back in 1952 by Michigan State University. They took 3 different sources of nutrients, urea, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, and they attached to it a radioactive isotope. And then they fed a measured amount onto a cotton leaf. And then they measured how long it took to get from that leaf to the roots by following that radioactive isotope. And urea, as you can see, was 100% absorbed in 18 hours. That's there. That's the basis for why foliar feeding is such a good strategy. The others went in too, but not as efficiently and not to the same degree that urea went in. Urea is the best foliar product that's out there. The problem with water-based urea is that unless you have the exact correct concentration, it burns the leaf. And number 2, it runs off the leaf. Now you're getting benefit of it that runs off the leaf. It gets onto the ground, and it utilizes both UV light and microbial activity to break it down. But urea goes into that plant very, very quickly. And our products have 65% urea in it. You can't get that much urea into an aqueous solution, even if you heat the water. So keep that in mind. Where the isotope study showed it was 8 to 10 times more effective to foliar feed. Further university studies have found the difference to be between 6 and 100 times more effective depending on the nutrient. Okay, that's a bold statement, but then look at this. Absorption rates for nutrients applied to plant foliage. This came from Purdue University. Look at number 1, nitrogen is urea, 50% absorbed in a half an hour to 2 hours. Go back then to the slide that showed urea being absorbed 100% in 18 hours, and this just gives credence and credibility to that. You can look at the rest of them. You can see that, yes, they do go in. Some go in rather quickly, some not so. But the KQXRN and downstream products from the KQXRN, if you mix phosphorus or potassium or magnesium or sulfur or chloride with it, or any of the micronutrients with it, will go in at the same rate because the XRN is an outstanding encapsulator. And it will take it into that leaf at the same rate, and now you're getting the benefit of the foliar feeding through those polar cuticular pathways. It's the most effective way to apply micronutrients. Extremely effective. Micros always win. We always seem to be short on micros in our soils. We would rather see you put the micros in at planting time, because that's when the plant needs it the most. It takes it up out of that seed furrow. But if you come up short during the course of your growing season, you can foliar feed micronutrients and you can see a very, very fast turnaround. If you put too much glyphosate onto a crop, you get something called manganese flash. It turns the whole leaf yellow. Without manganese, photosynthesis cannot occur. So you can foliar feed. I mean, the plant will turn around by itself, but you've lost that time when that plant is now yellow from photosynthesis. So your yield is going to go down. You can immediately reverse that by adding whatever you happen to be deficient in. In this case, we're talking about manganese, and you will see a green up very, very quickly within a day of the application on a foliar basis. But you will need something to take it into the plant by itself, which is the slow release nitrogen products. Now we get into micronutrients 101. I won't spend a lot of time on this because you could do a whole presentation on this, but every one of these, every single one, including chloride, has a significant impact on photosynthesis, whether it comes from the soil or whether you foliar feed it. Seems like micros always win. Manganese plays a direct role in photosynthesis. Boron is sugar production, which is part of the photosynthesis reaction. Successful protein synthesis cannot occur without photosynthesis. Of iron, nitrate reductase, taking those things that plant can't utilize as a nutrient, like nitrates. Nitrate might be in the plant, but it's still not a nutrient until it gets into the NH form. So, then calcium, magnesium. You saw the magnesium center ion in the chlorophyll two-dimensional chemical structure. Chloride actually is without it, you cannot go through photosynthesis. There's an intermediate product called manganic chloride hydroxide. It only lasts for a short period of time in that plant leaf and throughout the plant, but without it, you don't go through photosynthesis. Zinc is necessary for chlorophyll production. So keep in mind that micros always work, and you can turn around a micro deficient plant by foliar feeding it the right way. For best results for foliar fertilizer, your product should contain nitrogen. It's the most studied foliar nutrient, and depending on the type of product that you've got, it's 30 to 99% foliar absorbed. Okay, this is the other slide, guys. These are the 4 things that you've got to have for an outstanding foliar product. If you have 3 of them and not 4, does that mean it won't work? No, it's just not going to work as well. Number 1, you need a non-ionic species. It can't have a net charge on it. The reason is because those polar cuticular pathway openings are charged. So if it's the wrong charge, it's not going to do anything for you. Connected directly to that is a non-polar species, which means that molecular structure has to have an equal distribution of electrons. Micronutrients in the form of salts are not our polar species. They are not non-polar, and they are also ionic species. And you need a non-ionic species in order to effectively foliar feed. You've got to have organic molecules present, meaning you have to have the presence of soluble carbon. And all of our products has that, as well as urea having that. And then nitrogen present, preferably in the form of urea. Now, Lee brought up a good point yesterday when we were going through this presentation with the TopKrop folks. And Lee, why don't you mention what you had to say?
Well, you got to think back on your products, your post-emergent products, namely Roundup, namely Banville, those types of products come to mind right off the top of my head, that you spray on the leaf and they go through the leaf into the plant, and especially Roundup, that plant is killed from the root system out. It shuts off the chlorophyll and the photosynthesis process and kills that plant. So if you think back, if you think that foliar doesn't work, you need to think about this process, because Roundup shouldn't work if foliar doesn't work. And it all comes back, like I said before, it all comes back to photosynthesis. It shuts off that plant's photosynthesis and chlorophyll production and kills the plant. Where you're going with a foliar feed like XRN or 2075, and that goes into the plant to increase that photosynthesis and chlorophyll.
Now, thanks, Lee. That was really a good idea yesterday. I challenge you all to go back and look up a site called PubChem, P-U-B-C-H-E-M, and look up the chemical structure of glyphosate. You'll find a central nitrogen molecule, got nitrogen. You'll find organic molecules in the form of methylene groups. That is soluble carbon. You will find one end of that has a carboxylic acid on it, and which is also a soluble carbon, and the other end has a phosphorus functionality on the end of it. It is a non-polar species because the electron distribution on the right side of the molecule is offset by the electron distribution on the left-hand side of the molecule. It is a perfect foliar mechanism. That's why it works so well. The only reason it doesn't kill the regular plant is because of the infusion of the Bt gene in the crop plant or in those seeds. Every fungicide that's on the market today is an outstanding foliar mechanism. It just doesn't stick onto the leaf. There's nothing to stick it there, which the Kugler products all have something that sticks it on that leaf up to 30 days. And it slow releases in the presence of ultraviolet light. Very important slide, extremely important thing to remember, because this gives you everything that you need for a quality foliar product. Our starter fertilizers, our 624-6, our competitor 624-6, one of our competitors 622-2, doesn't have any of these except for the presence of nitrogen. There's no organic molecules present. It is not a non-polar species. It's entirely polar, and it is entirely an ionic species. So foliar feeding or spraying a starter fertilizer on the surface of a plant leaf isn't going to do you anything other than waste your time, effort, and money, in our opinion. That's the urea molecule. You have that carbon double bond oxygen with 2 nitrogens set aside. Now, we have 150,000 of these in each individual polymer unit in the KQXRN. And you look at the KQXRN as an onion. As the sunlight hits it, UV light cleaves that double bond, breaks it entirely in half, making that nitrogen now available. You have a very unstable molecule once that oxygen molecule has been cleaved off. And so as the sunlight hits that particle, keeping in, for every particle, there's 150,000 of these things in there. And keep in mind that there's hundreds of millions of those in a single droplet that's on the leaf, if you want to look at it at a huge macro scale. So this is why it works as well as it does. And that nitrogen in the NH form will immediately go into that plant leaf. KQXRN is 72% slow release nitrogen. That's 72% of all of those particles floating around in that liquid medium. And then 28% of it are what we call oligomers, which are very short chain polymers that are also in that liquid medium. Those oligomers immediately go into the plant leaf. They're of a size that will immediately infuse via that polar cuticular pathway. That's why you get such a fast green up. The rest of it slow releases over a 30-day period. This is busy, but you'll be able to see all those carbon double bond oxygen, nitrogens with a connector, those red bonds between them, which is the methylol functionality. And this is just a two-dimensional representation of what our product looks like. And to put it in 3 dimensions, each one of those bonds is going in a different direction. It looks like a fishnet that you've balled up. And each one of those strands in that fishnet that's touching another strand is a chemical bond. And then the sunlight hits it and breaks down that carbon double bond oxygen, making the nitrogen available. These are the products that we normally see. KQXRN is the mother and father of all of them. All of the products that you grow up in Canada respond extremely well to 2075. The 178C is a plant health product. Chloride is a ubiquitous product in every single fungicide on the market. And so we're infusing chloride into that plant leaf, which is exactly what a fungicide does. Our 2530, KQXRN 2530 is meant to increase protein at a point of soft dough. We don't even run trials on that anymore. It's works so well. And then, of course, we have our KS Micromax in Canada as well. Here's foliar urea nitrogen, just urea dissolved in water. And in this case, this is 5 gallons applied over the course of this field, and you see the damage that's done. Now that plant will recover. It will grow new leaves, but you've lost the photosynthesis in that square or in that surface area on those leaves where you see the burn. Here's the same field side by side with a KQXRN applied to it. Just simply does not burn. I've desperately tried to make neat without water KQXRN burn plant, and I've put up to 25 gallons an acre. What I figure that was, just keep spraying it and spraying it and spraying it. I can't get it to burn. And that's the difference between polymerized urea and the urea molecule by itself. There it is on the leaf. You can actually see it. Your whole field will brighten up and shine because of that. And it's very sticky, extremely sticky, hence its ability to stay on the leaf. There it is after 48 hours. You can visibly see it deteriorate in the presence of ultraviolet light. There it is after 72 hours. Now, at the end of 30 days, there's not much left, but there is still evidence that it's on that leaf, releasing nitrogen and doing its job. Very compatible with most insecticides, herbicides, and fungicides. Like I said, it's an encapsulator. It's a perfect delivery system. It makes especially herbicides much more effective, and it helps to keep those fungicides on the leaf if that's the direction you wish to go with your fungicide applications. Lee?
This was a project or a plot that we did down by the Regina area, and They had Canadian thistle out there. They sprayed Canadian thistle on this particular section of the field, and you can see there's a little bit of wilt, and you can't see a lot. But in the next slide, you can see that with XRN and glyphosate, after 24 hours, notice all the silver that's on there. It seems to be trying to take that plant, and that's probably a wrong. I put glyphosate on there. That was my fault. It's not glyphosate. It's the herbicide that they sprayed on with the XRN. Glyphosate, the wheat would have been dead. So anyway, that there, you can see from the plant after 48 hours that the Canadian thistle is dead and won't survive. It has to do a lot with the stickiness of XRN and its ability to stay on that leaf for longer periods of time. If you just think about it, you're spraying water with your herbicide or glyphosate, whatever the case may be. You're going to get some of it on the plant. That leaf is going to take some of it in on the initial spraying. But if it's hot and dry, you're going to run a lot of that water and chemical is going to run off. So you're not getting the full benefit of the money that you paid for the herbicide into that leaf. Whereas with XRN, it sticks on that leaf and it stays on that leaf, as Jay showed you in the last 3 slides there, how it stayed on that leaf over a period of time. So that plant has more time to take that herbicide in and take it down to the roots to kill it. Excuse me.
And you're fed your plant at the same time with the available nitrogen and the XRN. So exactly. Keep that in mind.
So here it is with the pre-burn. This is with the glyphosate. Of course, on the left is with glyphosate and XRN, and then on the right is just with glyphosate. So we average about right at 3 days faster kill than the other, and a more complete kill. I could give you several instances of velvet leaf and things like that we have down here in cornfields where it's worked tremendous, where we only had a couple leaves out there and it went ahead and killed it. So things like that really works. I guess if there's one thing you take away from here today, excuse me, is those 2 slides that Jay showed you are very important. And this here, if you want to try XRN to see if it works, these last 2-3 slides here, and put it in your post-emergent herbicide, and I'll guarantee you'll see a faster kill and a more complete kill on your weeds.
Thanks, Lee.
Yep.
Best timing for foliar applications is when plants are in that transition zone between vegetative and reproductive. On canola, it would be starting at about 20% into flower. That's when that plant can't take up enough nutrients from the soil. So why not give it some benefit? Why not increase that rate of photosynthesis and the uptake of water from the soil at that stage? On any flowering plant, it's about 20% into flower. On corn, it would be somewhere between V8 and VT. So you're trying to give yourself as much benefit as you can by feeding it at that point. That certainly doesn't mean that you can't foliar feed before that. Those guys that have the world record foliar or world record corn and soybean crops are doing it by foliar feeding by as many as 9 times. The world record wheat crop is 249 bushels from England. And they're constantly foliar feeding that crop at least up to 9 times, because they've actually got trams that they've got running over those crops on a regular basis. So the more times you make a pass, the more that plant is going to take it up. The grower's limitation is how much money he wants to spend, and we fully understand that. But understand that the more times that you do it, the better chance you have of an increased yield.
It's kind of like throwing wood on a fire. You know, you start the fire and you just don't leave that same wood there. You put another log on the fire and it stokes it up, and that's the same way foliar works. The more times you spray that leaf or spray that plant, the better your chances are to increase chlorophyll and increase photosynthesis in that plant, taking up more nutrients from the soil.
If you're going to make a pass with a fungicide or a pesticide or a herbicide, put some of the product in with it. You're not spending any more money at that stage, and we are compatible with virtually everything that's out there. You just have to keep in mind that there are some mixing limitations based on the chemistry behind the chemical that you're using. Always add the water and the chemical first. Make sure it's water reduced or very well agitated, and then put the fertilizer in last. Now, I know you're not that interested in corn and nutrient, but this is just backup to what we say. Tassel, you're taking up on corn, you're taking up 11.1 pounds of nitrogen per acre per day for 13 days. I mean, that's a huge amount of nitrogen that you're taking up out of the soil. Why not foliar feed and increase that? Also, why it's important to have a good soil program, because again, foliar can't meet the entire needs. Soybeans, soft seed, you're taking up 11.4 pounds per acre per day for 21 days. Think about how much that is. It's huge. And so foliar feed it to give yourself a chance to improve your yield across the board.
We forgot to put that in, but we have a slide on canola that it breaks this down on vegetative state and when it changes like that, and the rates there are the same as far as the take up of potassium and take up of phosphate and so on in different stages on the canola plant.
And we can get that to you if you want it. It's not data by us, it's data by the Canadian Canola Council. And it shows by stage of growth on a 44 bushel per acre yield, what it takes up during the course of the growing season. And on that slide, the interesting thing is that that plant is taking up 40% of its phos needs in the last 2 stages of growth, which means if you don't have a lot of phos in the ground at that stage, you can foliar feed it at that stage in conjunction with the slow release nitrogen. And Lee, results?
Should we do it? Sorry to interrupt, guys. Should we do a giveaway now?
Should we, what? I'm sorry?
Should we do our giveaway now, or one of the giveaways?
Sorry, I forgot about that. Yes.
No, no worries. Perfect. Okay, so I have our first winner of the $500 gift card for TopKrop is Gerald Fodchuk. Gerald, are you on? If you want to, just or if you could just add like a thing to the chat just to let us know that you're there, and then we will let you know where to pick up your prize. Do you know? Just make sure that Gerald's on. Oh, perfect. Yeah, he says he's here, so that's great. Okay, I'll let you guys continue.
Okay. Lee, I'm gonna get all of these up.
Okay.
Before you start talking.
All right.
There you
go.
One
more. Here we go. All right. This was done up at PA Conservation Learning Center up there. The check, of course, there you can see it's 66 bushel. The 100% in was applied at the beginning of the pre-plant, basically, is when it was applied. And then you have the 81 bushel of what we applied with 1.5 gallons of XRN at the herbicide time. He added that in when he went over it with the herbicide, 1.5 gallons of 1022 4 days later. And then he had 2 gallons of XRN 10 days later and 1.5 gallons of XRN 2530 at soft dough. As Jay stated, okay, that's 4 times. We realize that you don't have the sprayer capability, the manpower to go over X number of acres, but you're going over it once with the herbicide. So that would be one time you could do that. And then you could probably, manage to get in there somewhere around that 2 gallon of XRN 10 days there, right around cabbage, or right around 20% bloom, somewhere in that vicinity. A guy could get into the canola field then. So just something there as far as on wheat and canola that you can get in and do. This here was the first protein test that we did. For those of you that want to increase your protein, we have done 8 of these tests over the last several years in various locations, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota. We did 2 or 3 of them or more up in Canada. They applied 2 gallon of XRN 2530, applied it soft dough. And there was the difference in the protein. And the reason Jay and we talked about this when we first did this. And I said, well, back when I was farming, if we had a dry June, because we harvest in July, right around the 4th of July is when we harvest. If we had a dry June, that wheat usually always had protein. And so if we had a wet June, then we had yield and the protein was down. And so we all know that it has to do with nitrogen and the amount of nitrogen that you either spray on, top dress, or have in the soil. But I always thought that it had something to also do with stress on that plant. So what we did, being the 2530 has a lot of its nitrogen released pre or fast or first, and then it slowly releases about 25 or 20% of it to the last part of the life of that product. We thought maybe it might stress that product into increasing protein and act like a dry year to increase that protein. And to our surprise, I guess, it worked. We have, like I said, 8 or 9 of these trials. We average around that 2% increase in protein. We've had one that had 0.2%, so it wasn't a lot. But we've also had one up there in 6 or 7%. And now I lay a lot of that to dry weather and different things else. So we throw out that one, we throw out the bottom one, our average is about 2%. Okay. This is another conservation learning center up in PA in 2014. This was on oats. 100% of the nitrogen was at seeding time, 50% of the nitrogen at seeding plus a foliar. And then we that was what we did at seeding time. And then there was 2 gallon of 2075 with the herbicide again. You're already going over it. You can throw it in there. And then we come back at flag leaf with 2075. This one here is on soybeans. We did this one basically to show you that the more you put on is not necessarily the best way to do it. If you kind of like me when I was farming, all the rest of you, if a little bit's good, a whole lot more is better. That doesn't really seem like it is with a foliar application.
Just one qualification. Lee's referring to if you at one application.
Right.
And so in this case, it's a single application of 3 gallons or 2 gallons or whatever the deal was. And so what we have always said and will continue to say is that we'd rather see you put 1 gallon on 3 times than 3 gallons on. But again, we understand your limitations.
So that, and you can read it there, like the first one we put on XRN and 2075 together at those rates. And with the control did not have anything. And then we've had 2 gallon of 2075 and 3 gallon of XRN. Actually, the 2 gallon of 2075 was actually the best in the plot. So that's like Jay said, you know, do it 2 or 3 times if you can, and if your time allows. You know, like Jay says, this is the data that we're giving you. These are the plots that we're showing you, and this is the results. Now, you as the owner, you have to make that financial decision on whether you can apply this data to your farm and how much of that you can apply to your farm. So we're not saying you have to spray 3 or 4 times. If you can, that's probably the best. But if you can't, then you need to adjust however you can. Here's some peas in 2016. 4 gallon of 624 with some humic, the K pack, and the Maximum, the micronutrient package. Gallon half of 2075 with Maximum, and then a 2 gallon of 178C with a half rate of fungicide. Those peas were running right at 84, I believe, bushel, if I remember right. Yep. But then they got the whole field swathed, and wind came in and blew the peas all around, and that was it. They didn't get the whole field. So we don't have a whole field average on the whole field or on the whole plot. So that's the reason there is no average there. Here is up at Birch Hills. This is Florian. I believe I didn't, I was going to check last night and I forgot, but this, I believe, had 2 gallon of, or 1.5 gallons of 2075 twice. You can see the difference in the root system. You can see the difference in the height of the plant. All that has to do, again, is with photosynthesis and chlorophyll production. Here's a plot that was west of PA. We really didn't have this plot planned. The grower called us, and we was on our way. We was going west, so we was on our way by there, so we stopped. He had these leaves picked. This is nothing as far as spraying goes, no fungicide, no fertilizer as far as foliar goes. Then he put on a fungicide on part of the field, and then he had 1 gallon of 2075 on the other part of the field. So he went out, picked these leaves, and he wanted to show us that there is a difference between the fungicide, nothing, and of course the 1.5 gallons of 2075. This is some work that was done about 15 years ago or so when we first developed XRN. I realize this is corn again, but I just wanted to show you as far as the plant health of a corn crop or any crop matter is to speak.
Did you get your marigold?
Is 239 bushel, a gallon of XRN and 6 ounces of headline, 243 bushel, 2 gallon of XRN, and then of course you can read the balance there with the just headline and the check. So
now this slide is busy, but it also represents the 2 families of fungicide as compared to what we have, which is a KQXRN at 17% blended with an ammonium chloride source and used as a foliar mechanism. The top left represents the family of strobilurin. The bottom left represents a propionconazole, which are 2 of the major families of fungicides that are out there. The thing about these is that the top one, the conjugated benzene ring with the 4 chlorides and the 2 nitrogen groups, that is a non-polar, non-ionic, carbon containing. Each one of those little points that the chlorides and the nitrogen is connected to on that ring are carbon molecules, and it's also contains soluble carbon. So it's everything that you need, which is why fungicides work. They are a foliar mechanism. The propionconazole on the bottom is the same. It has a relatively even distribution of electrons. It contains soluble carbon. There's no net charge on any of the molecular structures in there, and it is a non-polar molecule. So it has everything that it needs. It's the same thing with the RKS 178C. We're not suggesting that this is a fungicide. We're suggesting that try it. Try a strip of 178C, then try a strip of just fungicide, then try a strip of half-rate fungicide and the 178C, and let economics make your decision for you. We've replaced well over 1 million acres of fungicide use by using the 178C, and the bottom line is the product works. For those of you who don't know what the mode of action of a fungicide is, look at the chloride ion. Chloride, when infused into the leaf and broken down into its components, stays in that leaf for a longer period of time than the other components, the oxygens, the nitrogens, the hydrogens that are in there. And by staying there longer, it protects that leaf against fungal attack. It's really not killing much of anything. You got to think in terms of the total number of fungal spores that are in an infected wheat field with Fusarium. You have more of those than you could count in 10 lifetimes. And you're putting 6 ounces of headline in. It's not killing anything. It's helping that plant to respond to the chloride that's in it and making it more and more resistant to that chloride or to that fungal attack.
Here's some examples of the 2530 and 178C together. We had the check there. Of course, didn't have any of those, either of those two. We had 3 liters of XRN 2530 sprayed with a half rate of the fungicide. You can see the results. Then we had 3 liters of XRN 2530 and 3 liters of 178C put together. You can see the results there. We're about 3 bushel higher, same protein. And then we had 3 liters of XRN 2530 and 5 liters of 178C. You can see that we went up another 4 bushel and increased the protein a little bit. That's an excellent deal there. That plot really shone. That was over in North Battleford. And you can see the difference in monies down at the bottom. Those are nets, backs, after the chemical and fertilizer was taken out. Here's a pea fungicide. You can see the check, of course, with nothing again. There's the fungicide at 54, Preaxer, and 3 liters of 2075 was 56. You add the 2075 and 178C together, which is a great combination. That's 59 bushel. And then you have the Preaxer there at the last at 47. So both the right and the left are pretty much the same yield. And you can see that the 2075, 178 kind of shown in this particular plot.
This one just represents what that 116 bushel canola crop used during. Now it's an aggressive program, and the grower who achieved this yield foliar fed 4 different times, and so he was very aggressive at it. But again, this just is credibility to the more that you foliar feed, the better chance you have of improving your yield and putting some money in your pocket. And this is available to anyone who wants it. This is not a Kugler publication. This is a publication by Pioneer, who supplied the seed source, and they were nice enough to tell the truth about the rest of the stuff that went into it. So these are all just, go ahead, Lee. I won't get into that.
Well, that's all right. I mean, this is just XRN over check. Basically, you have about 11% increase. That's what you put back in your pocket, basically, by using, this is XRN, all products, all crops, and so on, over what they used with XRN. And these were the trials that we did in that year. This is 2014, same. You're looking at about 13 or so percent. So pretty much the same. That's percent back. Here's just on wheat, barley, oats combined. It was a little higher. It was up around 16, 17% return back. And then you had the 2014 on canola was just under 10%, about 9%. 15, this is all plots, all crops again, was about 16%. Here's wheat, barley, and oats in 15, about 12, and here's XRN over on corn. It was about 16. So that's it. I hope you guys have got something from this today. And I just appreciate all you guys that showed up today and stuck it out. We really thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jay and Lee, very much for your, as always, very informative presentation. So we did have a couple questions come through, Jay and Lee.
Okay.
Let me just bring them up here. So the first one we had is, what time of day is the best time of day to apply? And I guess rain fast as well probably is part of that question.
Lee, go ahead.
Best time of day, you can spray it about any time. I would, up there in Canada, your temperatures doesn't get hot enough to probably warrant shutting down. So down here, if we get above 100, in that 100 to 105, the guys usually quit. I like to run about 10 gallon per acre. So I add some water with the spray. I like to run about 40 pounds of pressure so you get some fog in behind. And it's rain fast, so you don't have to worry about a rain coming in. I'd like to see you get it on at least an hour before rain, but that's not mandatory. Other than that, you can spray it about any time.
Yeah, that's 38 degrees in Canadian language.
Okay.
Can I jump in for a sec?
Sure.
Sure.
I've probably just kind of to add to that question, or to that answer to that question. Liberty is typically most effective kind of in the heat of the day, and I know when we're spraying long hours and kind of early morning doing Liberty, we don't get as good a result as we do in the afternoon, unless you have some Kugler in the tank. And Kugler just makes that Liberty come alive, and it doesn't seem to matter, 6 o'clock in the morning or 9:30 at night. You seem to get that same awesome kill if you got some XRN in the tank.
Perfect. Okay, so next question. Can I do damage to my wheat or barley if I mix 2075 with a plant growth regulator such as Modus or Manipulator?
I'm familiar with both of those, and the answer is no. It's just going to carry it into that plant more efficiently. And that's really the bottom line right there. We've seen it used with both, and we've never seen any problems with it.
The only problem we've seen with anything, Jay, is up there, that field we walked. Maybe you can explain sulfuric acid to them.
You got to be careful. If something's going to burn anyway, now keep in mind that if you're keeping it on the leaf for a month, it's going to get even worse. And there's a product up there that's referred to as a dihydrogen sulfate. And it's a pH adjuster, and dihydrogen, H2, sulfate, SO4, that's sulfuric acid. You put sulfuric acid in with something that's going to stick on the leaf for 30 days, you're going to burn the leaves. And of course, the grower up there said that it was our product that burned the leaf. you got to be careful what you're putting on. And I mean, we'll say this, if you have a question, get our phone number from any one of the TopKrop people and call us direct. We'll discuss it with you. Any chemistry whatsoever that you're dealing with. The first thing I do, I don't care what the brand name is. I want to know what the label says it is. I'll go online, I'll look at the chemical structure, and I can tell in the first 10 seconds whether you're going to have a problem with it. Certain chemistries tend to cause problems when they're in conjunction with something that sticks to the leaf for a long period of time. Just give us a call. But no growth regulators that we've ever seen have been a problem at all.
There's only one other thing with crop oil. We recommend that you do not spray XRN with crop oil. You take the crop oil out as far as we're concerned and put the XRN in because, like they said, your crop oil, it's just like a magnifying glass on that leaf. You've got an oil based on there. Now,
you don't need a surfactant. You may have to use it for the warranty on the manufacturer of the chemicals part, but you don't need it. KQXRN has been tested by the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology and found that its contact angle on a droplet that sits on the leaf is greater than 90 degrees. It's actually 126 degrees. When you're greater than 90 degrees, you are reducing the surface tension and increasing the surface energy, which is what a surfactant does.
So with a planter for seeding canola, FOS in furrow is limited. What are the best solutions to increase FOS?
Go ahead, Lee.
Well, the best solution to increase FOS, in my opinion, is putting a low salt starter in furrow. That is, to me, the best solution to take care of your FOS needs. Now, if your FOS needs are greater than, say, 20 pounds or thereabouts and from your soil samples, then you probably need to look at some sort of a dry product or liquid product, whichever it may be, to spray on before. But keep in mind that either one of those liquid or dry products that you put out there, you're probably only going to get in the neighborhood of 40 to maybe 50% use out of that product in the current growing year. Now, it's not to say that it's not going to dissolve and not going to be there for future years, but you're not going to get the use out of it like you do with an in-furrow starter to begin with.
Now you can come back in later and you can foliar feed FOS. And we have tried everything from mixing a low salt starter fertilizer to developing those FOS containing products. And we have all of the above. We have a product called 528, which is 20% FOS, and a portion of the nitrogen is a KQXRN. We have a 15-15-6. A portion of that nitrogen source is the KQXRN. Doesn't burn. Will carry the FOS in very nicely. You can also mix things together, but when you start mixing things, make sure you do it in the field on the same day that you're going to utilize the product, because if you leave it sit in a storage tank mixed up as a 3 different components, you're going to end up creating a really nice, beautiful snot in your tank, and you'll never get it through your sprayer. So it's best to use what we've already formulated, but there are other options as well. For instance, if you've got a starter fertilizer left over and you want to use it, we can help you with a ratio of one to the other and how much water to use as well. Then you'll
1022 is probably the most common one up here, I would say, Jay. Maybe just touch on that one.
Yep, 1022 is an excellent product. It's 10, 20, and then 2% potassium at the end of it. But a very large portion of that 10% nitrogen is the slow release. And you've got a lot of guys that have used it up there in the past, because frankly, it was the only product that we had to offer early on. Since then, we've got other products that have been developed that are perhaps a bit more stable. But don't try taking any of these products and storing them over the winter. You'll get a concretion on the inside of your tank, which is very difficult to clean out. So use it all. Be very efficient, but use it all with phos products. The phos and the methyl urea in the slow release nitrogen don't play nice together. And so over time, they will begin to try and replace each other on the chemical structures. So use them all up. And Lee, you wanna mention water and how much you like to see? Lee is the farming guy. He farmed for 25 years. So,
well, like I said, you know, I like to run like 10 gallons to the acre, and whatever fertilizer you're putting on, 2, 3, or 4 gallon, whatever it is, add the balance in there with up to 10 gallon and run 40 pounds of pressure.
Perfect. Thanks, Lee. Okay, well, thank you guys again for coming today and joining us, talking to us, about foliar feeding.
okay, thank you for giving us the opportunity, and have a great rest of your week.